Meanwhile, Commander Voss's voice cut through the station's background hum like a vibroblade through cheap insulation. That particular clipped cadence meant only one thing. Something had gone seriously wrong on Nexus Station. The priority security alert wasn't the usual noise pollution. This was the kind of broadcast that made species who'd never met humanity suddenly understand why we invented emergency exits. The announcement specified Sector 7, which happened to be exactly where Jake's repair bay was located. The missing individual description matched the hatchling in his workshop with terrifying precision. Scaled, approximately 3 feet tall, responds to Princess Ember of the Draconic Royal House. Every detail aligned perfectly with the crying client currently, trusting a human mechanic with her most precious possession. The alert didn't suggest contacting security. It explicitly warned all personnel not to approach under any circumstances. The wording carried that particular bureaucratic weight that meant someone very important was about to have a very bad day, possibly several someones, possibly entire civilizations. This created this beautiful cosmic irony, a child's simple repair quest happening against a backdrop of potential interstellar war. While Ember worried about her storytelling companion, diplomatic corps across 3 systems were probably reviewing mutual defense treaties. The station's ambient noise now included the subtle thrum of security teams mobilizing, the kind of sound you feel in your teeth before you hear it. The Draconic Royal House wasn't some minor alien species you could appease with trade concessions and ceremonial apologies. They were Imperial-level players with territory measured in star systems rather than planets. Their military capabilities included things that made human warships look like children's toys. Losing their princess wasn't an incident. It was the kind of scenario that started historical eras named after the resulting conflicts. This alert transformed a simple timeline into a ticking clock. Imperial security units deployed with that efficient silence unique to professionals who know exactly how much trouble they're in. They moved through the station's corridors like mercury flowing through glass tubes, bypassing normal traffic patterns with choreographed precision. Every second narrowed the gap between a quiet repair job and a full containment scenario. The stakes shifted from a single mechanic's survival to galactic stability. Jake's 3 rules existed to prevent exactly this kind of situation. Every instinct he'd developed over years on the station screamed at him to follow procedure. Report the hatchling, secure the area, wait for professionals. The survival manual practically wrote itself in his mind, but he'd already committed. You don't look at a crying child and then consult protocol handbooks. The human part of his brain had already overridden the survival part. That moment of basic decency had set events in motion that no security alert could stop. The resolution was already predetermined by human stubbornness. Galactic consequences would have to wait their turn. Jake was going to help this kid, and the entire draconic Imperial security apparatus would just have to deal with it. He was about to break every one of his carefully crafted survival rules simultaneously. Charging double seemed laughable now. Not asking questions became impossible when the questions involved Imperial succession. And as for running from glowing things, well, the memory keeper was starting to emit a soft pulse that definitely qualified. The rules that kept him safe were about to become the exact things that got him into unimaginable trouble. So Jake did what any sensible human would do when faced with a crying royal heir and an impending security breach. He completely ignored protocol and declared a field trip. The security alert's do not approach order became just another piece of bureaucratic noise to be tuned out. In that moment, helping a distressed child felt more important than following rules written by people who'd never had a 3-foot dragon look at them with tears in their eyes. He offered the workshop as an adventure, making it sound like they were explorers rather than fugitives. The shift from the station's public corridors to his private domain changed everything. Public spaces on Nexus Station were all smooth surfaces and controlled environments, designed to avoid offending any of the 1,000 species passing through. His workshop was the exact opposite, a glorious mess of human practicality. Tools hung on walls where they'd last been used. Spare parts sat in organized chaos, and half-finished projects occupied every flat surface. It smelled of ozone, lubricant, and that particular scent of heated metal that humans find comforting and most aliens find mildly alarming. Ember took one breath and declared it smelled like home. Not the sterile perfection of royal quarters, but the real scent of metal and electricity and good smoke. That immediate approval created a bond that diplomatic protocols could never achieve. She wasn't a princess here, just a kid in a fascinating place full of interesting things. The workshop became neutral ground where status didn't matter and only practical solutions counted. This human-centric space represented everything the station wasn't. Where alien technology favored sleek concealment, Jake's tools proudly displayed their purpose. Where diplomatic language wrapped simple concepts in layers of courtesy, here a wrench was just a wrench. The contrast between imperial grandeur and human functionality couldn't have been more pronounced if he'd tried. The workshop became their sanctuary, this bubble where normal rules didn't apply. Here, Jake's methods could clash with alien technology without anyone watching. Here, a dragon princess could forget she was supposed to be terrified of the big scary station and just be a child with a broken toy. The dim lighting and crowded shelves created a sense of isolation from the crisis developing outside. For a little while, they could pretend they were just a mechanic and his client. But sanctuaries have a way of becoming traps. This particular workshop was the one place security would eventually think to look. Jake's name was on the lease, his biometrics on the door, his work permits on file. Every security algorithm on the station would eventually point here. The very things that made it a perfect hiding place, its isolation, its private nature, its connection to the station's only human mechanic, also made it the obvious destination for anyone following procedure. They'd bought some time, but not much. The field trip would have to be a short one. Imperial security didn't appreciate delays, especially when royalty was involved. The workshop's doors would only hold so long against authorized entry protocols. For now, though, it was their little corner of the universe where a human could fix things his way, and a dragon could just be a kid. The resolution was already in motion. This temporary safety would collapse the moment security finished checking all the other possible locations. But for these few precious minutes, they had space to work without anyone watching. Now Jake got his first real look at the memory keeper under proper workshop lighting. The device wasn't just sophisticated, it was borderline religious. What looked like simple dark metal from a distance revealed itself as molecularly aligned alloys that shouldn't exist outside laboratory conditions. The crystalline additions weren't decorations. They were quantum computing matrices grown rather than manufactured. This wasn't just advanced technology. This was technology that made human engineering look like cave paintings. It combined quantum architecture with pure aesthetic grandeur in ways that defied logic. The components weren't just functional, they were beautiful in that particular way that suggests form and function had a violent argument and decided to coexist through sheer stubbornness. Jake identified quantum resonance chambers that could theoretically store information in parallel dimensions. Holographic projection matrices used principles human science hadn't even named yet. The data storage capacity made Earth's strongest supercomputers look like abacuses drenched in salt water. There was even what might be a miniaturized reality anchor, technology so far beyond human. Understanding that calling it magic would be an understatement. Human scientists theorized about such things in papers that got laughed out of conferences. The dragons apparently built them into children's toys. The gap between draconic achievement and human capability wasn't just large. It was fundamentally different categories of existence. Ember watched his examination with mounting anxiety. She'd positioned herself where she could see both his face and the device, her claws making tiny clicking sounds against the workbench. When he muttered "holy crap" under his breath, she immediately asked if that was good or bad in that careful way children have when they know something's wrong but hope otherwise. The question highlighted the cultural divide perfectly. To her, this was normal. To him, it was like finding a fusion reactor in a music box. This moment crystallized the vast technological gap between species. Human tools seemed suddenly primitive against this millennia-advanced artifact. Jake's diagnostic equipment, perfectly adequate for fixing starship engines and environmental systems, was roughly as useful as stone tools for brain surgery. The calibration lasers and spectrometers that normally gave him such confidence now looked like children's toys next to reality-bending technology. He realized the problem wasn't a broken part in any conventional sense. There were no burnt-out circuits, no fractured connections, no worn components. The issue was systemic, a complex failure cascade happening across multiple technological paradigms simultaneously. The memory keeper wasn't broken so much as confused, like a brilliant mind that had thought itself into a corner and couldn't find the way out. The diagnostic readings, Made no sense according to any repair manual ever written. Energy fluctuations followed patterns that violated conservation principles. Component interactions suggested the device was operating in several quantum states at once. Normal troubleshooting procedures were useless. This required understanding not just how the technology worked, but why it worked that way. And he had about 5 minutes before security kicked his door down. The soft thrum of containment field generators powering up somewhere in the station's infrastructure confirmed the timeline. Imperial security didn't knock politely. They established perimeter control first, asked questions later. The workshop's relative silence became suddenly ominous, like the calm before artillery bombardment. Jake looked from the impossibly advanced technology to his simple human tools. From the anxious hatchling to the door that would soon cease being a barrier, the solution, if there was one, wouldn't come from understanding draconic engineering. It would have to come from something much simpler, something fundamentally human. Here's where human intuition meets alien impossibility. Jake took one look at the incomprehensible readouts from his diagnostic equipment and did the most human thing possible. He ignored them completely. Standard alien repair protocols would involve ceremonial calibrations, quantum resonance mapping, and probably some chanting. Jake applied hands-on logic instead. His methods looked reckless compared to established procedures, like using a sledgehammer for watch repair. He bypassed the dazzling exterior components that screamed technological marvel and searched for core functionality. While draconic engineers would examine the quantum entanglement matrices, Jake looked for what he called the make-it-go parts. The bits that actually did the work rather than just looked impressive doing it. This approach immediately frustrated Ember, who kept gesturing toward the beautiful crystalline structures with obvious expectation. She clearly expected ceremonial reverence for the device, not this practical examination of its guts. He treated it not as a sacred relic, but as a machine that needed fixing. The distinction was fundamental. Where alien technicians would approach with ritual care, Jake poked and prodded with calibrated instruments designed for much cruder technology. His stubborn focus on practical function stood in stark contrast to the alien obsession with form. While they admired the beauty of the containment fields, he wondered why they needed containment fields around a simple memory storage device. This led to the breakthrough. He identified that the device's own security systems might be causing the failure. The memory keeper had so many layers of protection, quantum encryption, dimensional shielding, reality anchors, that they'd essentially strangled the core functionality. The security had become the problem rather than the solution. Like building a vault so secure you couldn't actually get to the things inside it. He theorized the problem wasn't underperformance, but over-engineering. The device wasn't broken, it was trapped by its own perfection. All those beautiful, advanced components weren't helping it function. They were preventing it from functioning. The solution wasn't adding more technology, but removing the unnecessary complications. The memory keeper needed simplification, not enhancement. But testing that theory required breaking his third survival rule in spectacular fashion. The device had started emitting a soft amber glow from its central crystal array. That particular shade of amber definitely qualified under the "if it starts glowing" clause. The low hum building in the workshop definitely fell under ominous humming sounds. Every instinct developed over years of not dying told him to create distance between himself and the glowing alien artifact. The resolution crystallized with terrible clarity. His theory could only be tested by doing the one thing he'd promised himself he'd never do. He'd have to interact directly with the glowing components while they were active. No safeguards, no protective barriers, just human hands and alien technology that was currently violating several laws of physics. Ember watched the glowing device with wide eyes, her claws nervously tapping the workbench. She asked if she should cover her eyes, treating the situation like some dramatic moment in a story rather than a potential technological catastrophe. The child's perspective highlighted the absurdity. She saw adventure where any sane adult saw reasons to evacuate the sector. The choice became suddenly simple. Follow the rules that kept him alive or trust the intuition that said sometimes the only way forward is through the glowing thing making ominous noises. The security teams were undoubtedly seconds from breaching his workshop. The device pulsed with increasing intensity. The third rule screamed retreat while human curiosity whispered opportunity. He made his decision. Rules existed to be broken, especially when they prevented you from doing the right thing. The wrench felt solid in his hand, a familiar weight in a situation rapidly leaving familiarity behind. Sometimes the solution isn't more technology. Sometimes it's the right application of force in exactly the wrong-looking place. Then comes the moment that defines human ingenuity. Jake raises his favorite wrench over the glowing device, that trusty piece of polished steel that had fixed everything from starship engines to coffee makers. The tool felt solid in his hand, a familiar weight against the alien uncertainty humming through the workshop. This single motion contained all the contradictions of humanity: primitive tool against quantum technology, blunt force against delicate systems, stubborn confidence against impossible odds. The tension stretched thin enough to snap. This could either fix everything or vaporize an irreplaceable artifact older than human civilization. There were no middle options, no partial successes. The memory keeper either worked perfectly or became interstellar dust. Jake's entire career balanced on this one calculated risk, his survival rules screaming retreat while something deeper pushed him forward. Ember asked if she should cover her eyes in that particular way children have when they know something dramatic is about to happen. She treated it like a fireworks display rather than potential technological catastrophe. That child's perspective highlighted the absurdity. Where adults saw reasons to evacuate the sector, she saw adventure. Her tiny claws still gripped the workbench edge, but now with anticipation rather than fear. The strike wasn't violent, but perfectly calculated. Jake targeted one specific resonance chamber that his diagnostics said was causing the feedback loop. The angle was precise, the force measured, the timing exact. It looked like madness, but followed its own internal logic. He wasn't trying to break the device. He was trying to reset it, like tapping a stuck gauge to make the needle move properly again. It's the kind of move that would give alien engineers heart attacks. Their entire methodology involved careful calibrations and ceremonial procedures. They'd use frequency modulators and quantum aligners for something this delicate. The concept of percussive maintenance didn't exist in their technical manuals. To them, technology was something to be revered and carefully manipulated. To Jake, it was something that occasionally needed a good whack. The device reacted immediately, but not with the expected destruction. Instead of exploding or shutting down, it seemed to reorganize. The chaotic amber glow snapped into coherent patterns. The sad beeping sounds cut off mid-warble. For one breathless second, nothing happened. Then everything happened at once. Holographic displays erupted from the crystal matrices, but now they showed ordered sequences instead of random chaotic beeping. Ancient draconic script flowed in elegant patterns, interspersed with star maps and historical records. The light show wasn't just fixed, it was enhanced, brighter and clearer than it had probably been in centuries. The memory keeper wasn't just working again, it was working better than before, like it had been waiting for someone to clear out the accumulated complications. The resolution arrived not with a whisper, but with a symphony of reactivated technology. The workshop filled with the proper hum of functioning systems, that deep resonant sound that meant everything was operating as intended. Ember's worried expression transformed into wonder as stories she thought were lost forever began playing in the air between them. The device wasn't just repaired, it was revitalized. And somewhere in the station's surveillance network, the Dragon. Emperor watched the entire procedure through security feeds. His perspective on humanity was about to undergo a fundamental shift. The solution wasn't in the advanced technology his species had mastered. It was in the simple, stubborn practicality of a species that hadn't yet learned what was supposed to be impossible. Meanwhile, Emperor Draknor observed the entire repair process from his command center, the security feeds providing a crystal-clear view of the human's workshop. The Dragon Emperor watched with that particular stillness that made even his most seasoned generals nervous. His perspective wasn't just technological assessment. It was cultural evaluation on a scale humans couldn't comprehend. What looked like a simple repair job became a window into an entire species' psychology. He asked his general what he saw when looking at this human mechanic. Not what the sensors reported or the analysts concluded, but what he actually observed. The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. This wasn't casual curiosity, It was imperial assessment in its purest form. The general's response captured Jake's essential paradox perfectly. He noted the primitive methods accomplishing the impossible, the crude tools solving problems that had baffled draconic engineers for generations, the utter lack of ceremonial respect for technology that his own people treated with near religious reverence. He described watching Jake work as seeing someone use a stone axe to perform brain surgery, and somehow getting better results than the laser scalpel. Then came the crucial observation. The general noted Jake had treated their daughter with kindness when others would have shown fear. Where station personnel saw a security risk or diplomatic incident, Jake saw a distressed child. That simple distinction shifted everything. The assessment moved from technological capability to character evaluation, from what the human could do to who the human was. This changed the entire nature of the observation. The Emperor began seeing not just a mechanic but a potential strategic asset, someone who approached problems from angles his own people had forgotten existed. Where draconic engineers saw complexity to be mastered, this human saw simplicity to be uncovered. The difference wasn't just methodological, it was philosophical. The resolution became suddenly clear. Jake's actions demonstrated a different kind of intelligence altogether. Not the accumulated knowledge of millennia of advancement, but the raw practical problem-solving that comes from not knowing what's supposed to be impossible. It was the intelligence of necessity rather than tradition, of function rather than form, of results rather than process. This was the quality the Dragon Empire had been missing for centuries. Their technology had advanced so far they'd forgotten how to think simply. Their methods had become so refined they'd lost the ability to be crude when crudeness worked better. They could build quantum resonance chambers but couldn't fix them when they malfunctioned, because the idea of malfunctioning had been engineered out of their thinking. The Emperor watched Jake wipe grease off his hands with a rag that had seen better centuries. The human didn't even realize he'd done anything remarkable. To him, it was just another repair job. To Draknor, it was revelation. The solution to problems that had plagued his empire for generations might not lie in more advanced technology, but in less advanced thinking. The security feeds showed Ember's delighted reaction as the memory keeper sprang to life. Her joy was unmistakable, even through the surveillance quality. The human had not only fixed the device, but had somehow made it work better than before. The Emperor made a decision in that moment that would reshape interspecies relations for the next 1,000 years. Sometimes the most advanced solution comes from the most primitive approach, and sometimes the most valuable asset isn't the one with the most knowledge, but the one who knows how to use what they have. Here's Jake's radical synthesis that changes everything. He explains that draconic engineers built the device to be fancy rather than functional. They focused on quantum matrices and reality anchors instead of core purpose, treating technology as art rather than tool. The tension builds as he reveals what their own engineers missed for centuries. All those high-end components weren't the device itself. They were the security system protecting the simple data storage and projection inside. The beautiful crystalline structures, the quantum resonance chambers, the dimensional shielding, none of it actually stored or projected memories. They just protected the simple mechanics that did. This means the dragon's own reverence for complexity blinded them to simplicity. They'd become so focused on making technology impressive that they forgot to make it reliable. The device didn't fail because of component failure or design flaw. It failed because its security systems became too complex to maintain. The protection mechanisms designed to safeguard the memory keeper had essentially suffocated it. Like building a fortress so secure that the people inside couldn't breathe. Jake's wrench strike accidentally reset those systems to factory settings. His calculated tap on the resonance chamber didn't fix the device. It rebooted the security protocols. The force was precisely enough to disrupt the overcomplicated protection systems without damaging the core functionality. It was the technological equivalent of cutting through red tape to get to the actual problem. The solution wasn't adding more technology but removing the unnecessary complications. Human practicality saw through alien grandeur to the essential mechanics. Where draconic engineers saw sacred technology to be revered, Jake saw machinery to be understood. His approach bypassed centuries of ceremonial procedure and went straight to function. He treated the memory keeper not as a religious artifact but as a broken device that needed fixing. This perspective shift made the impossible suddenly simple. The Emperor realizes his entire civilization has been over-engineering for centuries. The revelation hits with physical force. Their technological advancement had become its own limitation. They could build systems of breathtaking complexity, but couldn't maintain them because maintenance required understanding simplicity. Their engineering philosophy valued elegance over reliability, ceremony over function. They'd created technology so advanced it became fragile because nobody remembered how to fix it when it broke. This explains why the memory keeper had sat in royal archives for generations, slowly failing while their best engineers performed ceremonial calibrations. They were polishing the security systems while the actual device deteriorated. The solution required someone who didn't know the technology was supposed to be unfixable, someone who would approach it with fresh eyes and simple tools. The workshop becomes suddenly very quiet despite the humming devices. The Emperor's silence speaks volumes as he processes this information. His entire technological paradigm just got turned inside out by a human with a wrench. The implications stretch beyond this single device to every piece of technology in his empire. How many other systems were failing because of over-engineered security? How many problems remained unsolved because their solutions had become too complicated? Jake stands there wiping grease off his hands, completely unaware that he just rewrote draconic engineering philosophy. To him, it was just a practical solution to a broken device. To the Emperor, it was a revelation that would change everything. The simplest solutions are often the hardest to see when you're surrounded by complexity. And sometimes the most advanced technology just needs someone who isn't impressed by how advanced it is. Meanwhile, Ember decides the outcome herself. While the adults discuss technological revolutions and engineering paradigms, she watches from her perch on the workbench. The technical talk flows over her like background noise, all quantum this and systemic that. She's more interested in the human who fixed her memory keeper than the philosophical implications of how he did it. Her perspective cuts through the complexity like a laser through fog. She interrupts their technical discussion with a child's directness. No ceremonial phrasing, no polite waiting for the right moment, just a small voice cutting through imperial business like it's playground conversation. The tension snaps into place immediately. Royal protocol dictates complete silence during imperial discussions. Even princesses don't interrupt emperors, especially when they're having revelations about centuries of technological stagnation. The security team shifts uncomfortably, unsure whether to enforce protocol or recognize royal privilege. She asks her father the question that changes galactic history. 4 simple words in common galactic, delivered with perfect childish clarity. Can we keep him? The phrasing suggests Jake is a pet or a toy rather than a person. That's exactly why it works. It bypasses thousands of years of diplomatic protocol and gets straight to the core of things. No treaty negotiations, no status discussions, no complicated agreements. Just a child asking if someone she likes can stay. This childish phrasing masks a profound diplomatic suggestion. What sounds like whimsy actually represents a fundamental shift in interspecies relations. She's not asking for a servant or employee. She's asking for a companion. Someone who treats her like a person rather than a princess. The distinction matters more than the actual words. It reframes the entire relationship between humanity and the Dragon Empire, from transactional to personal. She recognizes Jake's value not as a servant, but as a companion. Her perspective isn't about what he can do for the Empire, but who he is to her. He fixed her memory keeper when nobody else could. He treated her like a person rather than a diplomatic problem. He made her workshop adventure feel exciting rather than frightening. These things matter more to a child than technological breakthroughs or strategic advantages. Her advocacy comes from genuine affection rather than political calculation. There's no subtle maneuvering here, no hidden agenda. She likes the human who helped her and she wants him around. The simplicity of her reasoning makes it more powerful than any diplomatic proposal could ever be. Politics complicate things. Children simplify them down to essentials. Sometimes the most sophisticated solutions come from the least sophisticated thinking. This humanizes the diplomatic moment amid all the high-tech implications. While emperors and generals discuss quantum mechanics and engineering philosophy, a child reminds everyone what actually matters. The memory keeper wasn't important because of its technology. It was important because it told her stories. Jake wasn't valuable because of his repair skills. He was valuable because he helped when she needed it. The personal cuts through the political like a sharp knife. The Emperor considers her request not as whimsy but as wisdom. He looks from his daughter's hopeful expression to the human mechanic's confused face. The security teams wait silently, their protocols suddenly irrelevant against this simple question. The workshop feels different now, less like a place of technological revelation and more like a setting for personal decisions. The Emperor sees not just what his daughter wants, but why she wants it. He realizes incorporating human ingenuity might solve more than just broken relics. The perspective shift matters as much as the practical skills. Someone who approaches problems without preconceptions. Someone who sees technology as tools rather than treasures. Someone who helps crying children because it's the right thing to do, not because it's strategically advantageous. These qualities might be exactly what his empire needs after centuries of increasing complexity. The resolution forms not in council chambers or diplomatic meetings, but in a messy workshop with a child's question hanging in the air. The most important decisions often come from the simplest questions. And sometimes the future of interspecies relations depends not on grand treaties, but on whether a little girl gets to keep her new friend. So the Dragon Emperor makes an unprecedented proposal. The position of Chief Imperial Engineer hasn't been filled in centuries. The role became essentially ceremonial, after draconic technology advanced to the point where maintenance wasn't supposed to be necessary. Their engineering philosophy assumed perfection, rather than acknowledging the possibility of failure. The position gathered dust in imperial records while technology became increasingly complex and increasingly fragile. Offering it to a human breaks every protocol in the book. There are traditions about lineage, educational requirements, and species qualifications that stretch back millennia. The Dragon Empire doesn't employ outsiders in technical roles, especially not ones involving classified technology. Their isolationist policies exist for reasons both practical and philosophical. Giving a human access to their most advanced systems represents a fundamental rewriting of those policies. The role comes with full diplomatic immunity and unlimited access to imperial resources. Jake would go from station mechanic to galactic problem solver overnight. His authority would surpass admirals and ambassadors. He could requisition anything from experimental technology to military support. The transformation isn't just professional, it's existential. One moment he's charging aliens double for circuit repairs. The next he's troubleshooting technology that defies known physics. The offer includes special rates for crying hatchlings. That single clause acknowledges how this all began. It's the Emperor's way of recognizing that sometimes the most important solutions start with the simplest motivations. The wording suggests that royal children get priority service and maybe a discount. But mostly it serves as a reminder that imperial power should still recognize basic decency. This represents a fundamental shift in draconic governance philosophy. They're embracing outside perspectives rather than reinforcing isolation. For centuries, their technological advancement followed an inward-looking path. They refined what they already knew rather than exploring what they didn't. Now they're acknowledging that fresh eyes might see solutions their own engineers missed. It's the kind of philosophical adjustment that usually takes generations to accomplish. They're not just hiring a mechanic, they're adopting a methodology. Human practicality becomes imperial policy through this single appointment. The stubborn focus on function over form, the willingness to try unorthodox solutions, the lack of reverence for tradition, these become assets rather than liabilities. The Empire gains not just a repair technician, but an entire new way of thinking about problems. Jake accepts without fully understanding what he's signing up for. To him, it's better pay and more interesting work. He doesn't realize he's just become the Empire's secret weapon against technological stagnation. His simple human approach to problem-solving becomes their strategic advantage. Where others see impossible complexity, he sees machinery that needs adjusting. That perspective turns out to be more valuable than any technical manual. His workshop is about to become the galaxy's most interesting repair shop. The location doesn't change, but the clientele does dramatically. Instead of fixing coffee makers and environmental systems, he'll be troubleshooting technology that most species don't even know exists. The tools might get upgraded, but the methods stay the same. That familiar space becomes ground zero for interspecies technological innovation, all because one human couldn't resist helping a crying child. The security teams that were ready to arrest him now become his protection detail. The protocols that labeled him a risk now classify him as an asset. The transformation happens with bureaucratic efficiency, all the paperwork processed before he even fully understands what's happening. One signature changes his status from station nuisance to imperial necessity. The system that almost crushed him now supports him completely. Now the shop needed a new sign. The old one was simple, just Jake Morrison Repairs in straightforward lettering that matched his no-nonsense approach. It served him well for years, attracting the kind of business that kept him fed and the door open. No fancy claims, no unrealistic promises, just a name and a service like thousands of other repair shops across the station. The challenge became how to advertise his new capabilities without sounding completely insane. Fix his ancient dragon relics wasn't the kind of thing you put on signage if you wanted to be taken seriously. Most species would read that as either delusional boasting or dangerous truth, neither being particularly good for business. The tension between honesty and credibility played out in the choice of wording. He settled on something that balanced humility with unbelievable capability. The new sign read, "Wrench Morrison's Repair Shop. We fix everything, even ancient dragon relics." The nickname was Ember's doing. She'd started calling him Wrench after watching him work, and it stuck better than his actual name. The phrasing acknowledged the absurdity while still making the claim. It said, "We know how this sounds, but we're serious anyway." This approach served as both advertisement and subtle warning. Clients who understood the reference would know they'd found someone capable of handling their most impossible problems. Those who didn't would either dismiss it as humorous exaggeration or wonder what kind of shop they'd stumbled into. The sign filtered his clientele before they even stepped through the door, attracting exactly the right kind of customers while gently discouraging the wrong ones. The sign became a symbol of cross-cultural collaboration. His human name paired with draconic capabilities, the informal nickname contrasting with the formal claim. It represented the new relationship between species, not subservience or superiority, but partnership. The workshop was where human practicality met alien complexity and found common ground. The sign told that story in 14 words without needing to explain anything. For those who knew to ask, it hinted at much more. The ancient dragon relics part wasn't just a boast, it was specific. The story of the princess and the memory keeper had spread through certain circles, becoming one of those station legends that sounded too good to be true. The sign confirmed it wasn't legend at all. It was invitation and confirmation simultaneously, saying the impossible was not only possible but available by appointment. The resolution came through the clients it attracted. Instead of people with broken environmental controls or malfunctioning translators, he started getting visitors with problems that defied conventional solutions. An ambassador with a ceremonial weapon that wouldn't stop whispering prophecies. A scientist with a containment unit that occasionally created miniature black holes. The kind of issues that made other repair shops politely suggest seeking spiritual instead of technical help. His workshop became ground zero for the galaxy's most interesting problems. The sign didn't just advertise services, it defined a new category of problem solving. Where Imperial engineers saw impossible tasks, Jake saw challenging repairs. The distinction mattered more than the actual capability. Believing something could be fixed was often the first step toward actually fixing it. The galaxy began bringing its most impossible problems to his door, because the sign said they wouldn't be turned away. Something about that simple declaration gave people hope that maybe, just maybe, their unsolvable issue might finally find a solution. It wasn't the imperial resources or diplomatic status that made the difference. It was the willingness to try when everyone else had given up. The sign promised that willingness in letters large enough for anyone to see. The first client under the new sign wasn't what anyone expected. An insectoid diplomat from the Xylos cluster arrived, carrying what appeared to be a containment unit that was simultaneously on fire and frozen solid. Flames licked at one end while frost crystals spread from the other, the paradoxical energies contained within creating a visible distortion in the air around it. The diplomat's multiple limbs handled the device with careful precision, despite the obvious danger, their compound eyes reflecting the strange dual nature of the problem they carried. This particular problem made the memory keeper look simple by comparison. At least the dragon relic had followed basic physical laws, even if they were advanced ones. This thing seemed to be violating thermodynamics as a matter of principle. The fire didn't melt the ice didn't extinguish the fire, and the whole arrangement hummed with energy that made the workshop's lighting flicker unpredictably. It was the kind of technological paradox that would make most engineers reconsider their career choices. The client had heard. Jake fixes impossible things through channels that shouldn't have known about him yet. The diplomatic gossip network moved faster than official communications, especially when it came to useful information. Instead of taking the device to Imperial engineers with their proper credentials and extensive facilities, the Xylosian came directly to a human repair shop on the station's maintenance level. This demonstrated how quickly Jake's reputation had spread across species and social hierarchies. When you need something truly impossible fixed, you go to the person who doesn't know it's impossible. The problem represented a new level of technological challenge. This wasn't just advanced alien technology. This was technology that seemed to be arguing with itself about what reality should look like. The device pulsed with conflicting energies that made the air taste like ozone and cinnamon. The diplomat explained in clicking, translated Common Galactic that it was a cultural archive that had malfunctioned during a ritual ceremony, apparently preserving one's history, while simultaneously maintaining ceremonial purity created complications that even the Xylosians didn't fully understand. Jake approached it with the same pragmatic stubbornness. He applied to everything. He didn't see a paradox, he saw a machine that wasn't working properly. His Imperial resources meant he could scan it with equipment that actually understood what it was looking at. But his methodology remained fundamentally human. He circled the device, muttering about thermal regulation and energy containment, while the diplomat watched with hopeful antennae twitches. He recognized this as another case of over-engineered security systems almost immediately. The scans showed the same pattern as the memory keeper. Layers of protection that had become so complex they were interfering with core functionality. The fire and ice weren't part of the archive's operation. They were security measures that had activated simultaneously and gotten stuck in a feedback loop. The device was essentially having an argument with itself about whether to incinerate or freeze potential threats, and in the process was making itself useless. The resolution came down to applying what Jake called creative human stupidity to yet another impossible problem. He prepared to interrupt the argument between the security systems with precisely calibrated interference. Not enough to damage anything, just enough to make both sides reset simultaneously. It was the technological equivalent of making two angry people suddenly realize they're being ridiculous. The method shouldn't work according to any engineering manual, but then the problem shouldn't exist according to those same manuals. The cycle began again, but now with Imperial resources behind him. Instead of using his favorite wrench, he used a resonance modulator from the Imperial Engineering Corps. Instead of guessing at energy readings, he had real-time quantum analysis feeding to his display. The tools were better, but the thinking remained the same. See past the complexity to find the simple problem. Identify what actually needs to happen, rather than what looks impressive. Solve the issue instead of admiring the technology. The Xylosian diplomat watched with all 8 eyes as Jake prepared to reboot their cultural archive. The stakes were arguably higher than with the memory keeper. This device contained the entire recorded history of their species. But the approach remained comfortingly familiar. Sometimes the most advanced problems require the simplest solutions, and sometimes you need someone who isn't impressed by how impossible something seems to be. Now consider what Jake's success means for humanity's place in the galaxy. Before this incident, humans occupied that peculiar niche of being primitive but useful. We were the species you called when you needed something heavy moved or a simple system jury-rigged, not when you had actual complex problems. Our place in the galactic community was tolerated rather than respected, like that one relative who means well but doesn't understand proper etiquette. Our blunt practicality often clashed with alien protocols and prestige systems. Where other species valued ceremony and tradition, humans valued results. Where they built intricate social structures around technological achievement, we just used the technology to get things done. This created constant low-level friction in interspecies relations. We were the uninvited guests at the galactic party, constantly forgetting which fork to use for the salad course of diplomacy. Jake's repair demonstration shifted everything. He showed that human intuition could solve problems advanced science couldn't. Where draconic engineers saw impossible complexity, he saw simple mechanical failure. His approach bypassed centuries of technological dogma and went straight to the heart of the problem. The solution wasn't more advanced science, it was less complicated thinking. This revelation resonated across species lines in ways nobody anticipated. Humanity shifted from being tolerated to being sought after. Suddenly, every species with problematic technology wanted a human perspective. Our bluntness became an asset rather than a liability. Where we'd once been excluded from delicate negotiations, we were now invited specifically for our straightforward approach. The galaxy discovered that sometimes you need someone who isn't impressed by how impossible something seems. Nexus Station transformed from a trade hub to a center for cross-species innovation. The repair shop became a meeting place for engineers from dozens of species, all looking to learn from human methodology. What started as a simple fix for a child's toy became the catalyst for genuine technological exchange. Species that had guarded their secrets for millennia began sharing information, realizing that collaboration produced better results than isolation. Other species began reevaluating their own technological approaches. The Draconic Empire wasn't alone in its over-engineering problem. Across the galaxy, engineers examined their systems with new eyes, asking whether complexity served function or merely tradition. The question, "What would a human do?" started appearing in technical manuals and design meetings. Sometimes the answer was embarrassingly simple. The galaxy learned that sometimes simpler methods produce better results. Advanced technology had become its own limitation across multiple civilizations. The quest for perfection had created systems too fragile to maintain and too complex to repair. Human practicality offered a way out of that technological dead end. Our willingness to try stupid solutions to impossible problems became our greatest asset. Human creative stupidity became a valued commodity. What other species saw as reckless, we saw as practical. Our ability to look at advanced technology and see simple machinery gave us an advantage nobody had anticipated. The galaxy started hiring human consultants not despite our primitive methods, but because of them. Our lack of reverence for tradition became our professional selling point. Jake's workshop became the epicenter of a new galactic renaissance. The messy, grease-stained space where he'd almost been arrested became a pilgrimage site for engineers seeking enlightenment. They came to watch a human work, to see how simple tools and stubborn thinking could accomplish what advanced science couldn't. The workshop represented a fundamental shift in how the galaxy approached problem-solving. The impact stretched far beyond technology. Diplomatic relations improved as species began valuing practicality over protocol. Trade agreements became simpler and more effective. Even military strategies shifted toward straightforward approaches rather than complex maneuvers. The human influence spread through galactic society like a beneficial virus, simplifying everything it touched. Our place in the galaxy changed because one mechanic helped a crying child. The simplest motivation produced the most profound consequences. Sometimes progress doesn't come from moving forward, but from remembering how to think simply. The galaxy discovered that the most advanced solution is often the one that's been right in front of you all along, waiting for someone to look at it without preconceptions. Despite the upgraded workshop tools and imperial credentials, Jake remains fundamentally unchanged. The transformation happened around him rather than to him. He still wears the same grease-stained coveralls, still keeps his favorite wrench in the same spot on the workbench, still takes his coffee black and slightly too hot. The external circumstances shifted dramatically, but the internal compass points exactly where it always has. The man who started with 3 simple rules now operates under imperial mandate, yet somehow the rules feel more relevant than ever. He now possesses full diplomatic immunity and unlimited access to imperial resources, yet approaches problems with the same pragmatic stubbornness. The backing of the Dragon Empire means he can requisition technology that would make human engineers weep with joy, but you'll still find him squinting at components and muttering about proper torque settings. The scale of the problems changed. The approach didn't. An emperor's support just means he can be stubborn on a galactic scale rather than a station level. His workshop might have better tools, but his methodology remains identical. The Imperial Engineering Corps supplied him with quantum resonators and molecular alignment scanners, but he still reaches for the manual tools first. The new equipment gathers dust while his trusted diagnostics get the real work done. He treats the advanced technology like any other tool, useful if it helps, irrelevant if it doesn't. The workbench may shine with alien alloys, but the thinking remains stubbornly human. He still charges aliens double, though now they might actually question it. Imperial clients sometimes glance at the invoices with mild confusion, but they pay without argument. The Dragon Empire covers the expenses anyway, and nobody wants to offend the Emperor's favorite mechanic. The principle remains sound. If they're not questioning the price, you're not charging enough. The numbers got bigger, but the philosophy stayed exactly the same. He still doesn't ask what devices do, though he probably should given their importance. The Memory Keeper incident taught him nothing about curiosity and everything about practicality. When a six-armed diplomat hands him a box that hums in 7 dimensions, he doesn't ask about its purpose. He asks about its symptoms. The potential interstellar consequences matter less than the immediate technical problem. This approach should be terrifying, but somehow it keeps working. And he still runs from glowing things, but now with Imperial security covering his retreat. The protocol shifted from individual survival to organized containment. When something starts emitting that familiar ominous hum, Jake heads for the reinforced door while Imperial teams move into position. They handle the potentially explosive parts. He handles the repair once things calm down. The division of labor makes everyone happier, especially the insurance underwriters. This consistency is precisely why the Dragon Emperor valued him in the first place. The Empire didn't need another advanced engineer. They needed someone who wouldn't be impressed by advanced engineering. Jake's unchanging methodology represents the exact quality their civilization had lost. His stubborn refusal to adapt to alien expectations became his greatest asset. They hired him not despite his simplicity, but because of it. Human ingenuity works because it's uncompromising, not because it's advanced. The galaxy had plenty of advanced. What it lacked was the willingness to look at impossible technology and see simple mechanical problems. Jake's value lies in his inability to be awed by quantum matrices or reality anchors. He sees machinery where others see miracles, and that perspective turns out to be more valuable than any technical knowledge. And that's exactly what the galaxy needed without knowing it. The various civilizations had become so focused on advancement that they'd forgotten foundation. They could build miraculous technology but couldn't maintain it. They'd created systems so complex they became fragile. Jake's simple, stubborn approach provided the corrective counterbalance. Sometimes progress means knowing when to stop complicating things and start fixing them. The galaxy needed someone who would treat their wonders like broken toys, because sometimes that's exactly what they were. So the next time something seems too complex to fix, remember Jake Morrison. Human ingenuity often succeeds where advanced science fails because we see essentials, not ornamentation. We look past the dazzling surfaces to the simple mechanics underneath. That stubborn focus on function over form turns impossible problems into manageable repairs. Sometimes the solution isn't more technology. It's the right technology applied with stubborn compassion. A willingness to help despite the risks. That combination of practicality and basic decency changed galactic history. Because sometimes all the advanced science in the universe needs is a human who isn't impressed by how advanced it is. Just as the holographic displays settled into their proper sequences, the workshop doors hissed open with that particular sound of authorization override. Not the polite chime of a customer, not the hesitant tap of someone lost. This was the sound of protocol enforcement, the noise bureaucracy makes when it decides you're a problem. Imperial security units flowed into the space with that practiced efficiency that makes individual movements disappear into group action. They established containment fields before they even fully entered the room. The shimmering barriers snapped into place around the workshop's perimeter, cutting off exit routes with silent finality. The fields hummed at a frequency designed to discourage foolish decisions. They'd surrounded Jake's sanctuary with the exact technology he'd spent years avoiding. His workshop became a containment zone in the time it takes to draw breath. Jake found himself in custody before he could explain anything. Security protocols didn't include listening to explanations from suspects. The violation notices stacked up faster than he could process them. Unauthorized contact with protected personnel. Interference with Imperial property. Operation of unlicensed repair services on classified technology. Each charge carried penalties ranging from station expulsion to permanent detention. What started as helping a crying child had become an interstellar incident, measured in legal violations. Ember tried to intervene, her small voice cutting through the professional silence of the security team. She used her full title and royal phrasing, the words practiced but genuine. The security commander listened with polite attention, then continued securing the area. Draconic security procedures didn't recognize royal authority during active containment operations. Protocol overrode lineage, procedure trumped privilege. Her status as princess became irrelevant against the weight of established security measures. The escalation happened with bureaucratic swiftness. One moment Jake was watching a happy child with a fixed toy. The next he was being processed as a security risk. The transformation from repair job to incident file took less time than the actual repair had required. The system moved with impersonal efficiency, treating royal tears and human kindness as data points in a risk assessment matrix. This collision between human improvisation and alien bureaucracy created a perfect storm of misunderstandings. Jake's workshop, designed as a refuge from station politics, became ground zero for diplomatic complications. The very rules that kept him safe now worked against him with brutal consistency. His isolation meant no witnesses to vouch for his actions. His preference for working alone meant no colleagues to support his story. The survival strategies that protected him now made him look guilty. The containment fields hummed their steady warning as security teams cataloged everything. Jake's tools, his spare parts, his half-finished projects, all became evidence in an investigation he hadn't known was happening. The memory keeper, now working perfectly, got tagged as Exhibit A in whatever charges they were preparing. The situation felt increasingly surreal, like being punished for doing the right thing too effectively. Then everything stopped. The security commander received a communication that made him straighten immediately. The containment fields shimmered and dissolved. The teams lowered their weapons and assumed parade rest positions. The change happened so suddenly it left emotional whiplash in its wake. One moment professional seriousness, the next deferential silence. The Emperor himself stepped through the workshop doors. Not on view screens, not as a hologram, in person. The most powerful being in the sector entered a human repair shop like it was his own throne room. His presence recalibrated the entire space, making everything seem simultaneously more important and completely absurd. Suddenly, Jake's messy workshop hosted imperial reality. The Dragon Emperor stood among spare parts and grease stains, his scales catching the work lights in ways that made the whole place look different. The security teams faded into background positions, their urgency replaced by watchful waiting. The resolution arrived not through procedures or protocols, but through personal intervention at the highest possible level. The workshop that had been a containment zone became an imperial audience chamber. The human mechanic who'd been a security risk became something else entirely. The Emperor's calm examination of the space felt more intimidating than the security team's weapons. This wasn't protocol anymore. This was personal interest from someone who rarely took personal interest in anything. The dynamic shifted from bureaucratic processing to something much more dangerous and much more interesting. So the Dragon Emperor steps into a human workshop for the first time. He moves through the space with that measured curiosity of someone encountering something both fascinating and slightly baffling. His scales catch the workshop lights differently than the station's illumination, making the whole place look like a different kind of reality. This isn't just unprecedented. It's the kind of thing that gets written into historical records as a turning point. An emperor doesn't visit a common mechanics shop. Emperors summon mechanics to throne rooms if they summon them at all. The rules of protocol get quietly rewritten with each step he takes deeper into the space. He examines everything with that particular intensity that makes objects seem more important just by being looked at. His gaze moves over the tools hanging on the walls, the spare parts organized in their chaotic system, the half-finished projects that represent human stubbornness in physical form. He doesn't touch anything, but his attention registers each item's purpose and placement. The contrast between imperial presence and workshop grit creates this beautiful tension. Here stands a being who commands star systems, surrounded by grease stains and leftover components from repairs past. His presence makes the space feel both larger and smaller simultaneously. The workshop had always been Jake's private domain, a place where human rules applied. Now it contains imperial reality, and the two concepts don't quite fit together comfortably. The power dynamics shift with each passing second. Security teams wait outside, but inside something more interesting happens. He asks Jake to explain his repair methodology in simple terms. Not the technical details, not the quantum principles, but the basic thinking behind hitting advanced alien technology with a wrench. The question feels like a test and an education simultaneously. It puts Jake in the position of teacher to the most powerful student imaginable. The mechanic becomes the expert. The emperor becomes the learner. This reversal of roles happens without ceremony or announcement. The power dynamic transforms from ruler-subject to collaborator-collaborator. They stand there surrounded by tools and technology, two professionals from completely different backgrounds finding common ground in problem-solving. The emperor listens with genuine attention, not the polite hearing that powerful people give to subordinates. He actually wants to understand the human approach, not just evaluate it. Jake's explanation starts simply. He describes looking past the fancy components to find the core function. How he ignored the quantum matrices and reality anchors to locate what actually made the device work. He talks about treating technology as machinery rather than mystery. The words are plain, the concepts straightforward, but they carry revolutionary implications. His explanation reveals a fundamental truth about draconic technology that their own engineers had missed for generations. The revelation isn't in what he says, but in what it implies. The dragons had become so focused on advancement that they'd forgotten simplicity. They'd layered complexity upon complexity until the original purpose got buried under centuries of improvements. They could build miraculous technology, but couldn't fix it when it broke because breaking wasn't supposed to be possible. The Emperor absorbs this information without reaction, but you can see the calculations happening behind those ancient eyes. Entire technological paradigms are being reevaluated in real time. Generations of engineering philosophy are being questioned by a human with a wrench and a pragmatic attitude. The workshop becomes the setting for a quiet revolution, with grease-stained tools as the instruments of change. This conversation would eventually reshape how the Dragon Empire approached technology forever. But in that moment, it was just two professionals discussing methodology while a repaired memory keeper hummed contentedly on the workbench. The most important revelations often come from the most unexpected teachers, and sometimes the simplest solutions are the hardest to see when you're surrounded by complexity. You know that feeling when a simple repair job turns into an interstellar incident? Jake Morrison, the only human mechanic on Nexus Station, was about to learn that lesson the hard way, when a tiny dragon princess showed up crying with a broken toy. He had no idea her father was the Dragon Emperor, and that fixing it would rewrite interspecies diplomacy forever. You know that guy on every station who survives on pure stubbornness? That was Jake Morrison, the human mechanic who ran his repair shop by 3 simple rules that kept him breathing in a station full of creatures who considered humanity somewhere between amusing, pets, and potential contaminants. First rule: always charge aliens double. They never questioned Earth pricing. A Zorblaxian would pay 200 credits for a simple circuit reset without blinking all 6 eyes. They assumed human tech was just that expensive. Jake never corrected them. Second rule: never ask what the device actually does. You don't want to know why the Verdant ambassador needed his bioscanner recalibrated at 3 a.m. You definitely don't ask why the security chief's neural interface smells like burnt sugar and regret. Some questions open doors better left welded shut. Third rule: if something starts glowing or making that low ominous hum, run first. Send the bill later from a safe distance, preferably with a bulkhead between you and whatever's about to violate local physics ordinances. These rules created a comfortable isolation. While diplomats danced their delicate dances in the upper levels, Jake stayed in his bay making honest money from dishonest ignorance. He became that rare thing on Nexus Station: predictable. Predictable meant safe. Predictable meant nobody looked too closely at the human who fixed things without asking questions. The station's social fabric was this intricate web of protocols and unspoken agreements. A place where offering the wrong refreshment could start a trade war, where the angle of one's antennae during introductions carried more weight than actual words. Jake bypassed all of it with human bluntness. No ceremonial greetings, no status acknowledgments, just a flat rate and a skeptical squint at broken machinery. This approach kept him alive through 3 station rotations. It also meant he ate alone, worked alone, and measured success by how many days passed without anybody trying to disintegrate him. The perfect system for a man who preferred wrenches to words. But systems exist to be broken, especially when they meet something they weren't designed for. Something small, scaly, and currently crying its eyes out in his repair bay. The rules were about to meet their first real test, and Jake was about to learn that some things are more important than survival. even on Nexus Station. Picture this: a 3-foot-tall dragon hatchling standing in the repair bay, scales like polished obsidian catching the workshop lights, tiny horns just starting to curve, clutching a broken piece of technology that clearly wasn't built for children. She'd come completely alone, which on Nexus Station was either incredibly brave or monumentally stupid. Probably both. She held the device like it was made of glass, though it looked like it could survive atmospheric entry. Dark metal with crystalline additions that should have been glowing but were just dull, dead surfaces. Instead of the proper hum of active technology, it made these sad little beeping sounds, like a heartbeat fading out. When she spoke Common Galactic, each word came out careful and practiced. You could hear the accent wrapping around syllables never meant for draconic vocal cords. She'd clearly rehearsed this. My name is Ember. A simple declaration, but delivered with the weight of someone who knew those 3 words carried significance beyond their meaning. Everything about her screamed royal lineage. The way she held herself despite obvious distress. The quality of her scales. The subtle patterns on what passed for children's clothing in draconic society. She was exactly where she wasn't supposed to be, doing exactly what she definitely shouldn't be doing. The station's security protocols probably had whole chapters about this exact scenario. She didn't call it a device or equipment. To her, it was a memory keeper. Not technology, but a companion that told stories of the old times, the way a human child might describe a favorite book that came alive. She'd whisper to it sometimes, little comforting sounds in her native tongue when the beeping got particularly pathetic. This created this strange moment where advanced alien archaeology met simple childhood attachment. The device was probably older than human civilization, containing knowledge empires would kill for. And here was this kid treating it like a teddy bear that stopped working. Jake looked at her, then at the obviously royal, obviously distressed, obviously unauthorized hatchling in his shop. All 3 survival rules flashed through his mind. Charge double. Don't ask questions. Run from glowing things. Then he looked at the tears making tiny steam puffs as they hit her scales. The rules evaporated, just melted away like cheap solder under too much heat. You could see the exact moment his cynical practicality lost to basic human decency. The universe has a way of doing that to carefully constructed systems. She held out the memory keeper, this blend of ancient technology and personal treasure. The request was simple. 4 words in heavily accented Common Galactic. Can you fix it? No diplomacy, no protocols, just one child asking for help with something precious. That question ignited everything that followed. It was the spark that would burn down Jake's comfortable isolation and rewrite interspecies relations across the sector. Simple, direct, and completely unaware of the consequences. Neither of them knew that while they stood there, security alerts were already flashing across every terminal on the station. Nobody thought to tell the human mechanic or the dragon princess that their quiet moment was happening against a backdrop of rising panic. The station's defense systems were quietly shifting to high alert, all because one small royal had gone missing with a priceless artifact. The repair bay felt like the calm eye of a hurricane. Outside procedures were being activated, search patterns established, diplomatic incidents brewing. Inside, a human mechanic was about to make a decision that would change everything, all because a kid asked a simple question with tears in her eyes.